The courtroom was quiet, save for the faint creak of wooden benches as people shifted in their seats. The air was thick with anticipation, and every eye was fixed on the man standing at the center of the room, Captain Edward Harrington. He stood tall, his posture unwavering, dressed in the immaculate uniform of a royal guard. His polished boots gleamed under the dim light, and his medals caught occasional flashes from the chandelier above. Among them, one stood out, the Victoria, cross pinned proudly to his chest. It wasn't just any decoration. It was the highest military honor awarded for acts of extraordinary bravery during wartime. To those who knew its significance, it commanded respect. Judge Arthur Pembroke sat behind the bench, his expression stern and unyielding. He adjusted his glasses and glanced down at the papers before him. The case appeared routine, a minor breach of protocol during a state function, but something about this particular defendant irked him. Perhaps it was Harrington's calm demeanor, or the way he seemed almost detached from the proceedings. Whatever it was, the judge couldn't shake off the feeling that the captain wasn't taking the matter seriously enough. "Captain Harrington," Judge Pembroke began, his voice sharp and authoritative, "you are accused of failing to adhere to proper conduct during an official ceremony. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Harrington stepped forward slightly, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Your Honor," he replied, his tone measured and respectful, "I acted in accordance with my duties and judgment at the time. I assure you there was no intent to disregard protocol." The judge frowned. There was something in the captain's voice, a quiet confidence, that only fueled his irritation. The courtroom remained silent, everyone waiting to see how the exchange would unfold. Even the clerk stopped shuffling papers, sensing the tension building between the two men. "You seem quite sure of yourself, Captain," Judge Pembroke said, leaning forward slightly. His gaze locked onto Harrington's face, searching for any sign of arrogance or defiance. But all he found was calm resolve. Still, the judge pressed on. "Tell me, does wearing that medal make you feel invincible? Does it give you the right to bend the rules as you see fit?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some attendees exchanged glances, unsure whether the judge's comment was justified or overly harsh. Harrington didn't flinch. Instead, he straightened, his back, his hand instinctively brushing against the edge of his uniform where the Victoria Cross rested. For a brief moment, his composure wavered, not out of anger, but out of restraint. He had faced far greater challenges in his life, ones that required more than mere patience. "Your Honor," Harrington responded evenly, "this medal is not a badge of privilege. It represents sacrifice for those who gave their lives and for those who continue to serve. If my actions appear questionable, I assure you they were guided by duty, not entitlement." But Judge Pembroke wasn't convinced. In fact, his frustration mounted. Here was a man who refused to show even a hint of remorse, who spoke as though he were above reproach. The judge's knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the bench. Then, in a surprising move, he pointed directly at Harrington. "Remove that medal," he ordered, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "If you're so confident in your innocence, let's see how you stand without it." Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom. Removing a Victoria Cross, especially in such a public setting, was unheard of. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It symbolized heroism, sacrifice, and the ultimate recognition of valor. Yet to everyone's astonishment, Harrington hesitated only briefly before reaching up to unfasten the medal. With steady hands, he removed it and placed it gently on the table in front of him. His eyes never left the judge's face. For a moment, the room felt frozen in time. No one dared to speak. The weight of what had just happened hung heavily in the air. Judge Pembroke leaned back in his chair, satisfied that he'd made his point. But deep down, a nagging doubt crept into his mind. Why hadn't Harrington argued? Why had he complied so readily? There was something about the captain's actions, or rather his lack of reaction, that puzzled the judge. Little did he know, this seemingly simple act would set off a chain of events that would change everything. As the hearing adjourned, Judge Pembroke dismissed the court, still seething over Harrington's behavior. He retreated to his chambers, slamming the door shut behind him. Outside, whispers filled the hallway as spectators debated what they had witnessed. Some admired Harrington's composure, while others criticized the judge's decision. But none of them could have guessed the secrets that lay hidden beneath the surface, waiting to come to light. Judge Pembroke sat alone in his chambers, the heavy oak door firmly shut behind him. The room was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, each second stretching longer than the last. His mind replayed the scene from the courtroom, over and over again. The way Harrington had stood so calmly, the way he'd removed the Victoria Cross without hesitation or protest. Something about it gnawed at the judge. It wasn't just the act itself, but the quiet dignity with which Harrington carried himself. Pembroke leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as if trying to massage away the tension building inside him. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man than met the eye. Was Harrington truly as arrogant as he seemed? Or was there something else, something deeper, that he was missing? The question swirled in his mind like storm clouds refusing to settle. Just then a soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called out, his voice sharper than he intended. The door creaked open, and his clerk entered, holding a thick folder marked "Classified" in bold red letters. The clerk looked nervous, shifting uncomfortably as he approached the desk. "Your Honor," the clerk said hesitantly, "this arrived earlier today. I thought you might want to see it before leaving." Pembroke frowned, taking the folder from the clerk's hands. "What is this?" he asked, his tone laced with suspicion. The clerk shrugged, clearly unsure himself. "It's addressed to you, sir. Came through secure channels." The judge dismissed the clerk with a wave of his hand, his curiosity piqued. Once alone again, he opened the folder and began flipping through its contents. At first glance, the documents appeared routine, reports, commendations, and service records. But as he read further, his eyes widened in disbelief. These weren't ordinary files. They contained classified information about Captain Edward Harrington's military career, including details of the mission that earned him the Victoria Cross. According to the documents, Harrington had been part of a covert operation years ago, one shrouded in secrecy even within the highest levels of government. During the mission, his unit had been ambushed by enemy forces in hostile territory. Outnumbered and surrounded, Harrington made the decision to lead a counterattack, exposing himself to enemy fire to protect his men. Against all odds, he managed to turn the tide of the battle, saving countless lives, but not without cost. Several members of his team perished in the fight, and Harrington himself sustained severe injuries that left lasting scars both visible and invisible. As Pembroke continued reading, another revelation struck him, one far greater than anything he could have imagined. Buried deep within the pages was evidence linking Harrington to royal lineage. According to the documents, Harrington wasn't merely a decorated soldier. He was descended from a distant branch of the British monarchy, a family whose existence had been deliberately erased from public record following a political scandal decades earlier. This meant that Harrington wasn't just a captain in the Royal Guard. He was technically next in line to inherit a dormant title tied directly to the crown. Pembroke stared at the papers, his heart pounding in his chest. Everything suddenly made sense. The quiet confidence, the unshakable poise, the air of authority that surrounded Harrington wherever he went. It wasn't arrogance. It was nobility. But what struck Pembroke most was the fact that Harrington had chosen to live a life of service rather than privilege. Instead of embracing his birthright, he had joined the military, risking his life for his country and earning the respect of those around him through sheer determination and courage. The weight of the discovery hit Pembroke like a freight train. He had accused Harrington of using his medal as a symbol of superiority, when in reality it represented the exact opposite. Every word Harrington had spoken in the courtroom now took on new meaning. When he said the medal wasn't a badge of privilege, he meant it. It was a reminder of sacrifice, of the lives lost under his command, and of the burden of leadership he carried every day. Pembroke closed the folder, his hands trembling slightly. For the first time in years, he felt a pang of guilt. a sensation he wasn't accustomed to. He thought back to his harsh words in the courtroom, to the order he had given Harrington to remove the Victoria Cross. At the time, he believed he was teaching the captain a lesson, putting him in his place. Now he realized how wrong he had been. Far from being an act of defiance, Harrington's compliance had been a display of humility. He hadn't argued because he understood the gravity of the situation better than anyone else in the room. Theo. Judge rose from his chair and began pacing the length of the chamber, his mind racing. What should he do now? Could he simply ignore what he had learned? No, that wasn't an option. Justice demanded accountability, not just for others, but for himself as well. He needed to confront Harrington, to understand the man behind the uniform and the legacy he bore. With a deep sigh, Pembroke made up his mind. He would summon Harrington to his chambers later that evening, away from prying eyes and gossiping tongues. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. The events of this day would change both their lives forever. As he prepared to leave his office, Pembroke couldn't help but wonder how different things might have been if he had known the truth from the start.
That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Judge Pembroke found himself pacing nervously in his private chambers. The weight of the classified documents still lingered heavily on his mind,
And he couldn't shake the image of Captain Harrington standing silently in the courtroom, unflinching even when ordered to remove his Victoria Cross. There was something profoundly unsettling about the realization that he had judged a man without truly understanding who he was. Pembroke glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearly time for Harrington's arrival. Earlier, under the pretense of discussing procedural matters related to the case, the judge had sent a formal summons requesting the captain's presence in his chambers after hours. He knew it was an unusual request, but he needed answers. Answers that could not be shared in the open courtroom or amidst prying eyes. As much as Pembroke valued order and protocol, he understood that this situation required discretion. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Pembroke called out, his voice firmer than he felt inside. The door opened slowly, revealing Harrington, still dressed in his immaculate uniform, though now slightly less formal without the ceremonial sash. His expression was calm, almost unreadable as he stepped into the room. "Your Honor," Harrington greeted politely, inclining his head slightly in respect. Pembroke gestured toward a chair across from his desk. "Please sit down, Captain." Harrington complied, lowering himself into the seat with the same measured grace that characterized all his movements. For a moment, neither man spoke. The silence between them was thick, charged with unspoken questions and lingering tension. Finally, Pembroke broke the quiet. "I've read the files, Captain," he began, his tone serious, but tinged with uncertainty. "All of them." Harrington didn't respond immediately. Instead, he met the judge's gaze steadily, his blue-gray eyes reflecting a depth of emotion that few people ever saw. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, yet there was a faint edge of weariness beneath the surface. "And what do you think of them, Your Honor?" he asked, his words carefully chosen. Pembroke hesitated, unsure where to begin. How could he possibly articulate the whirlwind of emotions swirling within him? Anger at himself for misjudging Harrington, guilt for his earlier actions, and awe at the revelation of the man's true identity. All of these feelings collided in his chest like stormy waves. But one thing was clear. He owed Harrington the truth. "I think I acted rashly today," Pembroke admitted, his voice softer now. "I accused you of arrogance, of using your medal as some sort of shield against criticism. But after reading those documents, I realize how wrong I was. That medal isn't just a symbol of valor. It's a reminder of the sacrifices you've made, isn't it?" Harrington nodded slowly, his fingers absently tracing the edge of his uniform sleeve. "It is, Your Honor. Every time I look at it, I'm reminded of the men who didn't come home, the ones who trusted me to lead them only to lose their lives because of decisions I made. Their faces haunt me even now. Wearing the cross isn't about pride, it's about remembering them." The judge exhaled sharply, running a hand through his thinning hair. He had always prided himself on being fair and impartial, on upholding justice without bias. Yet here he was, confronted by a man whose very existence challenged everything he thought he knew about honor and humility. "What about your lineage?" Pembroke asked cautiously, choosing his words carefully. "The documents suggest, well, they suggest you're more than just a decorated soldier. You're royalty." For the first time since entering the room, Harrington's composure faltered. A flicker of vulnerability crossed his face, quickly masked by the same stoic expression he wore in public. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply before responding. "Yes, Your Honor, that's correct," he said quietly. "My family once held a title tied to the crown, a title that was stripped away during a scandal generations ago. My ancestors chose to fade into obscurity rather than fight for recognition. By the time I was born, our name meant nothing to the world, and honestly, I preferred it that way." Pembroke raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Why?" Most people would leap at the chance to reclaim such a legacy. Harrington smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. "Because titles don't define a person, Your Honor. They never have. Growing up, I learned that privilege often comes with expectations that can overshadow who you really are. I wanted to forge my own path, to earn respect based on my actions rather than my bloodline. So, I joined the military. I chose a life of service over one of entitlement." The simplicity of Harrington's explanation struck Pembroke deeply. Here was a man who had every reason to embrace wealth, power, and status. Yet he had rejected them all in favor of duty and integrity. It was a level of selflessness that the judge found hard to comprehend, let alone emulate. "And the Victoria Cross?" Pembroke pressed gently. "Did earning it change anything for you?" Harrington paused, his gaze drifting toward the window where the last remnants of daylight were fading. "It changed everything, and nothing," he replied softly. "The medal brought recognition, yes, but it also carried a burden. People see it and assume I'm a hero, someone worthy of admiration. What they don't see are the nights I lie awake, replaying every decision, wondering if I could have done more to save my men. Heroism isn't something you claim for yourself, Your Honor. It's something others decide for you." Pembroke sat back in his chair, absorbing Harrington's words. He felt humbled, almost ashamed of his earlier behavior. This wasn't the arrogant, entitled man he had imagined in the courtroom. This was someone who bore the weight of immense responsibility with quiet dignity, someone who understood the cost of leadership far better than most. "You must despise me," Pembroke said suddenly, his voice low and filled with regret. "After what I said today, after ordering you to remove your medal, I wouldn't blame you if you did." To his surprise, Harrington shook his head firmly. "I don't despise you, Your Honor. If anything, I pity you for carrying the burden of judgment without fully knowing the people you're judging. We all make mistakes. What matters is whether we learn from them." The sincerity in Harrington's voice disarmed Pembroke completely. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely small, not out of fear or shame, but out of respect for the man sitting across from him. In that moment, he vowed to change, to approach his role with greater empathy and understanding. As the conversation drew to a close, Pembroke stood and extended his hand to Harrington. "Thank you for coming tonight, Captain, and thank you for helping me see beyond my own biases. I won't forget this." Harrington rose as well, gripping the judge's hand firmly. "Justice isn't just about punishing wrongdoing, Your Honor. It's also about recognizing humanity. I believe you'll do better moving forward." With that, Harrington turned and left the chamber, leaving Pembroke alone with his thoughts. The encounter had been brief, yet its impact was profound. As the judge stared at the empty chair where Harrington had sat, he realized that true greatness wasn't defined by titles, medals, or authority. It was defined by the strength of character that guided a person's choices, especially when no one was watching. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread quickly about Judge Pembroke's unusual request to meet privately with Captain Harrington the previous evening. Speculation ran rampant among spectators, legal professionals, and even members of the press who had gathered outside the courthouse. Some whispered that the judge might have discovered something extraordinary, while others speculated it was merely a procedural formality. Whatever the reason, there was an undeniable air of curiosity and tension in the room. Judge Pembroke entered the chamber with his usual measured gait, but today there was something different about him. His expression wasn't stern or unyielding, as it often was. Instead, he carried himself with a quiet gravity that drew everyone's attention. He took his seat behind the bench, adjusted his robes, and scanned the room. His gaze lingered briefly on Captain Harrington, who stood tall and composed near the defense table, before addressing those assembled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pembroke began, his voice steady and clear, "before we proceed further with this case, I wish to address certain matters that arose during yesterday's proceedings." The murmurs in the courtroom faded into silence as all eyes turned toward the judge. Even the clerk stopped shuffling papers, sensing the importance of what was about to be said. Pembroke paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts. Then, with deliberate care, he continued, "Yesterday I made a grave error, an error born out of haste and misjudgment. In my frustration, I ordered Captain Harrington to remove his Victoria Cross, believing it to be a symbol of arrogance rather than one of profound sacrifice. It is only now, after reviewing classified documents and engaging in private conversation with Captain Harrington, that I fully understand the depth of my mistake." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. People exchanged astonished glances, unsure whether they had heard correctly. A judge admitting fault, especially publicly, was almost unheard of. But Pembroke wasn't done yet. "Captain Harrington," he said, turning directly toward the defendant, "I owe you an apology, not only for my actions yesterday, but also for failing to recognize the immense weight you carry, not just as a soldier, but as a person of extraordinary character and heritage." Harrington didn't react visibly to the judge's words. He remained still, his hands clasped loosely behind his back, his posture unwavering. Yet those close enough to see his face noticed a flicker of emotion, a mixture of pride and humility, as Pembroke spoke. "To dismiss your Victoria Cross's mere decoration would be a disservice to the memory of those who gave their lives under your command," the judge continued. "It is not a badge of privilege, as I so wrongly assumed, but a testament to courage, leadership, and sacrifice. To ask you to remove it was both disrespectful and unjust." By now, the courtroom was utterly silent, save for the faint rustling of fabric as people shifted in their seats. Everyone listened intently, captivated by the unfolding scene. For many, this was more than just a legal proceeding. It was a rare glimpse into the complexities of human nature, where mistakes could lead to redemption and understanding. Pembroke leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on a tone of sincerity. "But there is more. Through my review of the evidence, I learned of Captain Harrington's noble lineage, a legacy tied directly to the crown itself. This revelation has forced me to confront my own biases and assumptions. Here stands a man who could have chosen a life of comfort and privilege, but instead dedicated himself to service, risking his life for his country and earning the respect of his peers through sheer determination and integrity." The judge paused again, allowing his words to sink in. Then, rising from his chair, he addressed the entire courtroom. "Let this serve as a reminder to us all. True greatness lies not in titles or accolades, but in the quiet strength of character that defines us when no one is watching. Captain Harrington embodies this principle in every sense." With that, Pembroke stepped down from the bench and approached Harrington, who watched him approach with calm resolve. The judge extended his hand, which Harrington accepted without hesitation. Their handshake was firm, a silent acknowledgement of mutual respect and reconciliation. "I am honored to restore your Victoria Cross to its rightful place," Pembroke said, gesturing toward the medal that lay on the table where Harrington had placed it the day before. Without hesitation, Harrington picked it up and reattached it to his uniform, the gleaming cross catching the light once more. Applause erupted spontaneously from the crowd, filling the courtroom with a warmth that hadn't been present before. As the hearing concluded, News of the judge's apology and the revelations surrounding Harrington spread like wildfire. Reporters clamored for interviews, eager to capture the story of a decorated hero whose humility and nobility transcended expectations. Yet despite the sudden surge of attention, Harrington remained unchanged. He declined most media requests, choosing instead to focus on his duties as a royal guard. For Judge Pembroke, the experience marked a turning point in his career. Inspired by Harrington's example, he began advocating for reforms within the judicial system, emphasizing compassion, empathy, and a deeper understanding of the individuals involved in each case. He introduced initiatives aimed at educating judges and lawyers about the importance of context and humanity in their decisions, ensuring that justice was served not just legally, but morally as well. In the weeks that followed, Harrington became a national figure, celebrated not for his royal bloodline but for his unwavering commitment to duty and honor. Despite the accolades, he continued to live simply, refusing to let fame alter his principles. To those who knew him best, he remained the same steadfast leader they had always admired, dedicated, humble, and resolute. Though their paths rarely crossed again, the bond forged between Judge Pembroke and Captain Harrington endured. It served as a powerful reminder that even in moments of conflict and misunderstanding, there exists the potential for growth, forgiveness, and transformation. Their story became a beacon of hope, a testament to the idea that true justice is not just about punishing wrongdoing, but about recognizing and celebrating the humanity in us all. In the weeks following the dramatic courtroom events, Captain Edward Harrington found himself thrust into a spotlight he had never sought. News outlets clamored for interviews. Historians dug into archives to piece together his family's erased lineage, and admirers flooded social media with tributes to his courage and humility. Yet despite the whirlwind of attention, Harrington remained steadfastly grounded. He continued his duties as a royal guard without fanfare, standing tall at ceremonial events, performing routine patrols, and mentoring younger recruits. To those who knew him personally, nothing about him had changed. He was still the same disciplined, quiet man they had always respected. For Judge Arthur Pembroke, however, life took on a new dimension. The encounter with Harrington had left an indelible mark on him, reshaping not only how he viewed justice but also how he approached his role as a judge. No longer content to simply preside over cases from behind the bench, Pembroke became an advocate for systemic change within the judicial system. He began organizing workshops and seminars aimed at fostering empathy among judges and lawyers, urging them to look beyond the surface when dealing with defendants. The law must serve humanity, he often said during these sessions, not just enforce rules. One of Pembroke's most significant initiatives was the creation of a mentorship program pairing seasoned judges with young legal professionals. Through this program, he encouraged open dialogue about bias, privilege, and the importance of understanding each individual's story before passing judgment. His efforts earned him recognition both domestically and internationally, with many praising him as a pioneer in modernizing the judiciary. Yet despite the accolades, Pembroke remained humble, frequently crediting Harrington for inspiring his transformation. "If it weren't for that day in court," he once remarked in an interview, "I might still be blind to my own shortcomings." As time passed, Harrington's legacy grew, not because of his royal ancestry or military honors, but because of the values he embodied. His decision to live a life of service rather than privilege resonated deeply with people across generations. School children wrote essays about him, soldiers cited him as a role model, and even politicians referenced his humility in speeches. Despite all this, Harrington avoided the trappings of fame. When asked why he didn't embrace the opportunities that came with his rediscovered title, he simply replied, "A name doesn't define you. It's what you do with it that matters." Harrington's influence extended far beyond public perception. Within the Royal Guard, he became a symbol of integrity and leadership. Younger members of the force looked up to him, not just for his bravery in combat, but for the way he carried himself off the battlefield. Stories circulated about how he would take extra shifts to cover for colleagues in need, how he spent hours training cadets, and how he always made time to listen to those struggling with personal challenges. His presence was a constant reminder that true strength lies not in power or authority, but in kindness and selflessness. Meanwhile, Judge Pembroke's reforms began to bear fruit. Courts under his guidance adopted more compassionate approaches to sentencing, taking into account factors like mental health, socioeconomic background, and personal circumstances. Defendants who might have otherwise been dismissed as criminals were given second chances, provided with resources to help them reintegrate into society. Crime rates in areas affected by these changes showed noticeable declines, proving that justice tempered with mercy could yield remarkable results. Though their lives diverged after the trial, Harrington and Pembroke occasionally crossed paths at Edo, official functions, memorial services, or charity events. Each meeting was marked by mutual respect and warmth, a testament to the profound connection forged between them. During one such gathering, Pembroke approached Harrington with a small, leather-bound book in hand. "I thought you might appreciate this," he said, handing it over. Inside were handwritten notes chronicling lessons Pembroke had learned since their fateful encounter, along with reflections on how Harrington's example had shaped his journey. Harrington accepted the gift graciously, flipping through its pages with genuine interest. "You've done more good than I ever could," he told Pembroke sincerely. "Your work will touch countless lives." Pembroke shook his head, smiling softly. "And none of it would have happened without you, Captain. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that justice isn't just about fairness, it's about compassion." As years went by, both men continued to leave lasting impacts on their respective fields. Harrington eventually retired from active duty, though he remained involved in veteran support programs and charitable organizations dedicated to helping wounded soldiers and their families. His quiet dedication inspired others to follow suit, creating a ripple effect of goodwill that reached communities far and wide. Pembroke, too, eventually stepped down from the bench, leaving behind a legacy of reform and progress. His memoirs, published shortly before his retirement, became bestsellers, offering readers insight into the complexities of the legal system and the human stories behind every case. In the final chapter, he wrote a heartfelt tribute to Harrington, calling him a beacon of honor in a world too often clouded by doubt. Their story became a part of history, a tale of redemption, humility, and the transformative power of understanding. It served as a reminder that greatness is not defined by titles, medals, or bloodlines, but by the choices we make and the lives we touch. Whether through acts of valor on the battlefield or decisions made in the courtroom, both Harrington and Pembroke proved that true heroes are those who strive to make the world a better place, one act of kindness at a time. And so, the memory of Judge Pembroke's apology and Captain Harrington's quiet dignity endured, not just as a moment in time, but as a timeless lesson, that even in our darkest hours, there is always room for forgiveness, growth, and the pursuit of a higher purpose.